I'm Elena. I'm 36 years old. And 3 months ago, I stood in a courtroom and watched a judge hand my entire life to the people I trusted most in this world, my own goddamn family. My sister smiled. Actually smiled. Like she'd won some kind of prize at a carnival. Like my destruction was something to celebrate. The gavel came down, and with it went everything: our parents' estate, my $10 million mansion, the investments I'd built with my own sweat and sleepless nights, the reputation I'd spent years cultivating. Gone. All of it. Gone. They called me unstable. Can you believe that? Unstable. They said I was unfit to manage the family assets. Ungrateful. A risk. A liability. Me. The one who stayed up nights taking care of our mother when she was dying. The one who kept the family business afloat when our father's health failed. The one who actually cared. But none of that mattered in that courtroom. Because my sister, sweet, manipulative Sophie, had spent years building her case. Planting seeds. Whispering in the right ears. Playing the concerned sibling worried about her troubled older sister. And they believed her. Every single word. I walked out of that courtroom with nothing. Nothing except the keys to my mother's old country house, the one nobody wanted because it was falling apart in the middle of nowhere. The forgotten property. The worthless inheritance. That's what I got. That's what my life had been reduced to. If you've ever been betrayed by family, please like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments, because you won't believe how this story ends. Trust me. The Sterling family. That's us. Was us. God, I don't even know anymore. From the outside, we were perfect. Perfect. The kind of family you'd see in magazine spreads about wealth and success. My father built a commercial real estate empire from nothing, absolutely nothing, and turned it into a legacy worth hundreds of millions. My mother was the socialite, the philanthropist, the woman who could walk into any room and own it with grace and intelligence. Sophie and I grew up in that world. Gala dinners and charity auctions. Private schools and summer homes. We had everything. Everything. And I thought, God, I was so stupid I thought we had each other. But there were cracks. There were always cracks. Sophie was younger by 4 years, and she was beautiful. I mean devastatingly beautiful. The kind of beautiful that makes people forgive you for things they shouldn't. She learned early how to use that. How to tilt her head just right and make daddy melt. How to cry on command and make mother rush to her defense. I was different. I was the serious one. The responsible one. The one who actually worked in the family business, who understood the contracts and the investments, who stayed late at the office learning every aspect of what made our empire function. I thought that mattered. I thought competence and loyalty counted for something. I was wrong. What I didn't understand, what I was too blind to see, was that Sophie didn't just envy what I had. She hated it. She hated that our parents trusted me with the real work. She hated that I had my own success, my own mansion that I'd purchased with my own earnings from the business. She hated that people in our social circle respected me for my intelligence and not just my last name. And she spent years planning how to take it all away from me. It started small. Little comments to our parents. Elena seems stressed lately. I'm worried about her judgment. She's been making some unusual decisions at work. Poison dropped into conversations like sugar and tea. Sweet. Subtle. Deadly. Then our mother got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and vicious and cruel. I put my life on hold. I was there for every doctor's appointment, every treatment, every terrifying middle-of-the-night emergency. Sophie? She'd show up for an hour here and there, perfectly dressed, with flowers and tears, and everyone would coo about what a devoted daughter she was. But I was the one holding mother's hand when she couldn't sleep because of the pain. I was the one managing her medications, arguing with insurance companies, researching experimental treatments. I was the one who actually showed up. And you know what Sophie was doing during all of this? She was meeting with lawyers. Gathering evidence of my supposed instability. Documenting every time I snapped at someone because I was exhausted. Every time I cried because watching your mother die is devastating. Every time I made a business decision she could later twist into something questionable. She was building her case. Methodically. Patiently. While I was trying to save our mother's life, Sophie was plotting how to steal mine. When Mother died, I was shattered. Absolutely shattered. The funeral was beautiful, Mother would have approved, but I could barely function. I gave the eulogy because I was the eldest, and I broke down 3 times trying to get through it. Sophie stood beside me, rubbing my back, playing the supportive sister. 2 weeks later, she filed the lawsuit. 2 weeks. She claimed I'd been manipulating our mother in her final months. That I'd used her illness to gain undue influence over family decisions. That I'd made reckless business choices that endangered the family's assets. That I was emotionally unstable and financially irresponsible, and a dozen other lies wrapped up in legal language designed to destroy me. And she had evidence. God, did she have evidence? Years of carefully collected proof. Emails taken out of context. Testimony from people she'd cultivated as allies. Financial records she'd misrepresented. Even a psychiatric evaluation she'd somehow obtained, because apparently having grief therapy after your mother dies is proof you're mentally unfit. I tried to fight it. I hired lawyers, good ones. I presented my own evidence. I told the truth about everything. But the thing about the truth is that it's often messy and complicated, and lies can be packaged so much more neatly. Sophie stood in that courtroom and cried. She talked about how worried she was about me, how she only wanted what was best for the family, how she'd tried to help me but I'd pushed her away. She was magnificent. A performance worthy of an Oscar. And everyone believed her. The judge. The trustees. The family friends who testified. They all looked at me exhausted, angry, grieving, and they saw exactly what Sophie wanted them to see. An unstable woman losing control. The judgment was brutal. I lost access to the family trust. I lost my position in the family business. I lost the mansion I'd bought with my own goddamn money because they claimed the funds had been inappropriately diverted from family assets. Everything. They took everything. Sophie got it all. The estate. The business. The respect. The victory. And I got that old farmhouse in the country. The one property nobody wanted. My consolation prize. My exile. The humiliation of it was suffocating. Walking out of that courthouse, knowing everyone was watching. Seeing the pity in some eyes, the satisfaction in others. Knowing that the Sterling family, my family, had decided I was the problem. The broken piece that needed to be removed. I didn't cry. Not there. Not where they could see. I walked to my car with my head up and my face blank, and I drove. I drove until the city disappeared behind me and the landscape turned rural and empty. But underneath the tears, something else was growing. Something cold and hard and patient. Rage. The farmhouse was worse than I remembered. I hadn't been there in maybe 15 years. It was where Mother grew up, this old 2-story structure about 90 miles outside the city, surrounded by overgrown fields and dying trees. She'd kept it for sentimental reasons but never visited, and after she got sick, it had been completely forgotten. Now it was mine. My kingdom. My prison. The driveway was barely visible under weeds. The paint was peeling. Half the shutters were hanging by a single hinge. When I unlocked the front door, the smell of dust and mold and rot hit me like a physical force. This was my life now. This decay. This abandonment. This nothing. I stood in that doorway for a long time, just staring into the darkness inside. Part of me wanted to turn around, get back in my car, and drive off a cliff somewhere. End it. Stop the pain. Give Sophie the complete victory. But I didn't. You know why? Because I'm too goddamn stubborn to die for the satisfaction of people who betrayed me. I walked inside. The furniture was covered in sheets that had turned gray with age. The floors creaked with every step. There was evidence of animals, mice probably, maybe raccoons, that had been making themselves at home. The electricity worked, barely, but the water needed to be turned back on and half the bulbs were dead. It was perfect. Perfect for someone who wanted to disappear. Perfect for someone who'd been erased from her own life. I wasn't there to start over. Let me be clear about that. I wasn't there to find myself or heal or any of that inspirational bullshit people say when your life falls apart. I was there to vanish. To hide from a world that had watched my destruction and done nothing. I slept on a musty couch that first night, still wearing my clothes from the courthouse. I didn't dream. I didn't think. I just existed in that space between pain and numbness where nothing really matters. The next morning, I started cleaning. Not because I cared about the house, but because I needed something to do with my hands. Something to keep me from screaming or drinking or doing something permanently stupid. I cleaned like a woman possessed. Scrubbing floors that hadn't been touched in years. Throwing out ruined furniture. Tearing down old curtains that disintegrated in my hands. Creating order from chaos because it was the only thing I could control. And slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice, something shifted. Somewhere in the repetitive motion of washing and scrubbing and organizing, my mind started to clear. The white-hot rage that had been consuming me began to settle into something colder. More focused. I started thinking about the lawsuit. About Sophie's testimony. About the evidence she'd presented. And I started seeing the holes. The inconsistencies. The things that didn't quite add up but that my lawyers had missed or couldn't prove. I started thinking about Mother. About the months before she died. About conversations we'd had when Sophie wasn't around. About the look in Mother's eyes when she talked about the family legacy and what would happen to it after she was gone. Mother was no fool. She knew Sophie. She'd watched her manipulate people for years. So why would she have left everything vulnerable to Sophie's schemes? Why wouldn't she have protected me somehow? Unless she had. That thought, that tiny spark of possibility, was the first thing that felt like hope in months. And hope, I learned, can be more powerful than despair. Because despair makes you passive. Hope makes you dangerous. I cleaned that house like I was cleaning my mind. Stripping away the layers of grief and humiliation to find what was underneath. And underneath, I found something I'd almost forgotten. Myself. The woman who'd built her own success before Sophie destroyed it. The woman who was smart enough and ruthless enough to survive in a world designed to break her. Sometimes revenge begins the moment you stop crying. And I was done crying. It was 3 weeks into my exile when I found it. I was in the dining room, which had been closed off for years. The door had swelled shut from moisture, and I'd had to force it open with a crowbar. Inside was more of the same, covered furniture, dead plants, windows so dirty you couldn't see through them. But this room felt different. Heavier somehow. Like it was holding secrets. I was pulling up the old rug, it was rotted through in places and needed to go when I heard it. A hollow sound. I stopped. Tapped my foot against the floorboard. Solid. Moved a foot to the left. Solid. Moved back to where I'd been. Hollow. My heart started pounding. I dropped to my knees and examined the floor more carefully. At first, I couldn't see anything unusual. But then I noticed that one board was slightly different from the others. The wood grain didn't quite match. The nails were newer. It took me 20 minutes to pry it up. The board was secured better than the others, and I had to be careful not to split the wood. But finally, it came free. Underneath was a space. A deliberate space. And in that space was a safe. I sat back on my heels, staring at it. A small, old-fashioned safe, maybe a foot square, covered in dust, but clearly maintained. The combination lock was still bright, the mechanism intact. Someone had hidden this. Carefully. Deliberately. And then hidden it again by sealing it under the floor. Mother. It had to be Mother. This was her house. Her room. Her secret. But why? And what was inside? I tried the combination. Random numbers at first. Our old address. Mother's birthday. Nothing worked. The lock was old but solid, and I didn't want to force it and risk damaging whatever was inside. I tried Father's birthday. Sophie's birthday. The date our parents got married. Nothing. I sat there for an hour, trying every significant number I could think of. Getting more frustrated. More desperate. This safe was here for a reason. Mother wouldn't have hidden it like this for nothing. And then, almost as a last resort, I tried my birthday. 4/12/89. The lock clicked. That sound, that tiny mechanical click, was the sound of destiny unlocking. I'm not exaggerating. In that moment, everything changed. My hands were shaking as I turned the handle. The door swung open. Inside was an envelope. Just one envelope, thick and yellowed with age, sealed with wax, actual red wax with Mother's initials pressed into it. Yes, Eleanor Sterling. I lifted it out carefully. It was heavier than I expected, packed with something substantial. My name was written on the front in Mother's handwriting. Just Elena. Nothing else. I broke the seal. Inside were documents. Lots of documents. Papers that had been carefully organized, labeled, protected in plastic sleeves. And on top, a letter. A letter in Mother's handwriting, dated 2 months before she died. My vision blurred with tears as I started to read. My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, they've already done what I feared. I'm so sorry, my darling. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you the way a mother should. But I need you to know that I saw it coming. Sophie has always been my difficult child. Beautiful, charming, and rotten underneath. I've known for years what she was capable of, but I hoped that I was wrong. That she would grow out of her jealousy and cruelty. That she would learn to love you the way a sister should. But I wasn't wrong. And in the months before I became too sick to act, I realized what she was planning. I heard her on the phone with lawyers. I saw the way she looked at you when she thought no one was watching. I understood that she would try to take everything from you the moment I was gone. So I prepared this. My trump card. My protection for you. My way of making sure that even from the grave, I could save my good daughter from my bad one. Inside this envelope is everything you need. Bank account information for offshore accounts in my name that Sophie doesn't know exist. Evidence of forged documents she's been creating for years. Proof of embezzlement from the family business that she's hidden. Names of lawyers and trustees who are loyal to me to US and who will help you when you're ready. I've also included the deed to a property in the Cayman Islands and documentation for investments held in a trust that only you can access. It's not everything the family is worth, but it's enough. Enough to survive. Enough to rebuild. Enough to fight back. Elena, I know you're in pain right now. I know you feel betrayed and alone and destroyed. But you're your mother's daughter. You are stronger than Sophie will ever be because your strength comes from real things: integrity, intelligence, love. Hers comes from manipulation and cruelty, and that kind of strength is brittle. It breaks. Use what I've given you wisely. Not rashly. Not with rage, though God knows you have the right to rage. Use it with the careful, strategic intelligence I've always admired in you. Destroy them, my darling. But do it properly. Do it thoroughly. Do it in a way that they can never recover from. This is my final gift to you. My final proof that I always knew who you really were and I loved you for it. Your mother. Eleanor. I read it 3 times. Then I set the letter down very carefully and pulled out the rest of the documents. Bank statements showing accounts in the Cayman Islands with over $12 million. Legal documents proving that Sophie had forged Mother's signature on paperwork transferring family assets. Financial records showing systematic embezzlement from the family business, small amounts over years that added up to millions. Names of 3 lawyers in the city who'd been retained by Mother before her death with instructions to help me if I ever contacted them. A trust document showing investments worth another $8 million that were held in my name through a carefully structured legal entity Sophie couldn't touch. Mother had been planning this. While she was dying in pain, exhausted, losing herself piece by piece to the cancer, she'd been protecting me. Preparing for the war she knew was coming. And she'd given me everything I needed to win. I sat on that dusty floor surrounded by documents, and I started laughing. Not happy laughter. Not the kind of laughter that means things are okay. It was the laughter of a woman who'd just been handed the keys to her enemy's destruction. They thought they'd broken me. They thought they'd taken everything. But they were wrong. So catastrophically wrong. I had money they didn't know about. Evidence they didn't know existed. Allies they'd never suspected. And most importantly, I had time. Time to plan. Time to prepare. Time to make sure that when I struck back, it would be absolute and final. That night, I didn't sleep. I read every document. Memorized every number. Studied every piece of evidence Mother had collected. And I started planning. They destroyed me with paperwork. Legal documents and testimony and carefully constructed lies. I would destroy them the same way. With patience. with precision, with the cold calculation of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Sophie wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd forgotten who taught her how to play. The first call I made was to David Chin, one of the lawyers on Mother's list. I used a burner phone I'd bought with cash. I didn't trust anything connected to my old life. Sophie had proven she could access my accounts, my emails, my records. So I went analog. Old school. Untraceable. Chen's secretary tried to screen me, but I used the code phrase Mother had written in her notes, Eleanor's trump card. There was a pause, then I was transferred immediately. Ms. Sterling. His voice was careful, professional. I've been expecting your call, though I'd hoped we'd hear from you sooner. I only just found the documents. I see. Can you come to my office? We should talk in person. We met the next day at a small law firm in a neighborhood I'd never had reason to visit. Chin was in his 60s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Your mother retained me 2 months before she passed, he said once we were in his private office. She was very specific about what she wanted. She believed that your sister would attempt to seize control of the family assets through legal means, and she wanted to ensure you had resources and representation when that happened. She was right. I followed the case. I'm sorry we couldn't intervene. Your mother's instructions were clear. We were only to contact you if you reached out to us first. She didn't want to tip Sophie off that there was opposition being organized. What can you do for me now? Chin smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark seeing blood in the water. Everything. Over the next 3 hours, he outlined a strategy. The offshore accounts were already set up with me as the sole beneficiary. Mother had done that before her death, legally and properly documented. The trust was solid and untouchable. Sophie couldn't get to any of it even if she knew it existed. But the evidence Mother had collected, that was the real weapon. The forgery alone would be enough to reopen the case, Chin explained. But combined with the embezzlement evidence, we can do more than just recover what you lost. We can destroy her legal standing completely. The trust will see her as a liability. The business partners will run. The court will view the original judgment as fraudulently obtained. How long will it take? To rebuild your case? 6 months minimum. To take it to trial? A year, maybe more. This needs to be airtight, Elena. We get one shot at this. I don't want to go back to court. Chin raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want? I thought about Mother's letter. About her instruction to destroy them properly, thoroughly, in a way they could never recover from. I want to make it so the court doesn't matter. I want Sophie to wake up one day and realize that everything she stole from me is worthless. That I've already won without ever needing a judge to tell me so. Chin leaned back in his chair, studying me. Then he nodded slowly. That's going to require a different approach. More expensive. More time-consuming. But more satisfying. Tell me. And he did. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. I wasn't going to sue Sophie. I wasn't going to fight her in court. I was going to make her irrelevant. The Sterling family business, the commercial real estate empire Father had built, operated through a complex web of subsidiaries and partnerships. Sophie now controlled the main holding company, but she didn't actually own most of the underlying assets. They were held by trusts, limited partnerships, corporate structures that had been set up over decades. What she had was access, control, the ability to make decisions. What she didn't have was actual ownership of the assets that generated the wealth. My plan was to acquire that ownership, piece by piece. Quietly, through shell companies and investment vehicles that couldn't be traced back to me. The money Mother had hidden was enough to start. $12 million, properly leveraged, could buy significant positions in the companies and properties that the Sterling business depended on. But I needed more than just money. I needed expertise, infrastructure, a team. That's where the other 2 lawyers on Mother's list came in, along with financial advisors and business consultants they brought into the circle. People who'd worked with Mother for years. People who knew the family business inside and out because they'd helped build it. People who were loyal to my mother's legacy, not Sophie's theft. We set up a new company. Sterling Capital Holdings, named deliberately, mockingly, as a middle finger to Sophie that she wouldn't understand until it was too late. It was registered in Delaware with layers of legal protection that made the real ownership invisible. And then we started buying. A limited partnership that owned 3 of the family's most valuable office buildings. Purchased at fair market value from partners who were happy to cash out. Shares in a development company that the Sterling business relied on for new projects. Bought gradually over weeks so the price didn't spike. A controlling interest in the property management company that maintained the family's retail centers. Acquired through a proxy bidder at an estate sale. None of it was illegal. None of it was even unusual. It was just business. Strategic investment by a company that happened to be interested in the same sector as the Sterling family. Sophie had no idea. Why would she? She was too busy enjoying her victory, attending galas as the new head of the family business, giving interviews about modernizing the family legacy. While she was playing queen, I was buying her kingdom out from under her. Chin handled most of the legal work. The other lawyers on Mother's team managed the corporate structures. The financial advisors found the opportunities. And I studied everything, learning the business in a way I'd never needed to before. Because before, I'd been part of the family. I'd had access through birthright. Now I had to earn it. And that made me better at it. I lived in that farmhouse like a monk. Barely eating. Sleeping 4 hours a night. Spending every waking moment analyzing deals, reading contracts, planning the next acquisition. The house stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like a fortress. My base of operations. The place where Elena Sterling had died and someone new, someone harder, smarter, more dangerous, had been born. 3 months after finding Mother safe, I owned or controlled enough of the underlying assets that Sophie's control was becoming hollow. She could make decisions, but I owned the things those decisions affected. 6 months in, I had majority positions in 7 of the 10 companies that generated the Sterling business's revenue. She still didn't know. Nobody knew. Because I'd been so careful. So patient. So quiet. But the time for silence was almost over. The first crack appeared at a board meeting for Sterling Acquisitions, one of the major holding companies. Sophie called the meeting to discuss a new development deal. A huge project, $200 million, that would be the signature achievement of her tenure. The deal that would prove she was worthy of the empire she'd stolen. She stood at the head of the conference table in her designer suit, commanding the room like she'd been born to it. And she had been, I guess. Just not in the way she thought. Gentlemen, she began. And ladies. This project represents the future of Sterling Acquisitions. A mixed-use development in the heart of downtown that will generate returns for decades. She clicked through her presentation. Renderings of gleaming towers. Projected revenues. Partnership structures. It was impressive. I'll give her that. If I didn't hate her with every fiber of my being, I might have been proud. But then the question started. Ms. Sterling, I noticed this project requires approval from Sterling Capital Holdings for the financing structure. Have you secured that approval? Sophie blinked. I'm sorry, who? Sterling Capital Holdings. They hold the notes on 3 of the properties we're using as collateral, and they have approval rights on any deals that leverage those assets. I'm not familiar with that company. When did we enter into that arrangement? According to the paperwork, the notes were purchased 8 months ago. I watched from the video feed Chin had arranged. We'd made sure I could see but not be seen. I wanted to witness this moment. Sophie's face went through several emotions. Confusion. Irritation. And then the first hint of fear. Who owns Sterling Capital Holdings? It's a Delaware corporation. The ownership structure is private. Find out. But she wouldn't. Not easily. We'd buried the ownership under so many layers that even a forensic accountant would take months to trace it back to me. The meeting continued, but Sophie was rattled. I could see it in the way she kept losing her train of thought, the way her confident smile became strained. The first seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next 2 weeks, it got worse for her. Another board meeting where she learned that a major property management contract had been sold to, you guessed it, a subsidiary of Sterling Capital Holdings. A development partnership that couldn't move forward because the limited partners had sold their positions to an investment vehicle that traced back to my shell company. A financing arrangement that fell through because the bank now had a new majority shareholder that was exercising veto rights. Every piece of the business she thought she controlled kept running into obstacles. Not obvious ones. Not dramatic ones. Just quiet refusals. Bureaucratic delays. Unexpected complications. And every time she investigated, she found the same name. Sterling Capital Holdings. She started asking questions. Demanding answers. Trying to figure out who was blocking her. But she was looking in the wrong places. She thought it was a competitor. A rival family. Someone from the business world trying to edge out the Sterlings. She never considered that it might be the sister she'd destroyed. Because I was nothing, remember? Unstable. Broken. Exiled to a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. Not a threat. Never a threat. I let her struggle for 3 months. 3 months of watching her deals fall apart. Her confidence erode. Her authority get questioned. Chin kept me updated on everything. The legal filings. The boardroom tensions. The whispers in the business community that Sophie Sterling was losing control. And I kept buying. Kept acquiring. Kept positioning myself until I had so much leverage that Sophie's control was purely symbolic. She could sit in the CEO's office. She could have the title. But I owned the business. Finally, Chin called me with the news I'd been waiting for. There's going to be an emergency shareholders meeting next week. The trust that holds the majority of Sterling acquisitions is demanding a review of leadership. Sophie's recent failures have made them nervous. Will she be there? She has to be. She's the CEO. Then I'll be there too. Chin paused. Are you sure? This is going to be intense. I'm sure. Because it was time. Time for Sophie to understand what had happened. Time for her to see me walk back into the world she'd tried to bury me in. Time for revenge. The shareholders' meeting was held at a high-rise downtown. The same building where our father had maintained his offices. The same building where I'd worked before Sophie destroyed my life. I hadn't been back since the trial. I dressed carefully that morning. A black suit, perfectly tailored. Hair pulled back. Minimal makeup. No jewelry except for Mother's wedding ring, which had been in the safe with the documents. I looked like what I was. A woman who'd gone through fire and come out forged steel. Chin met me in the lobby. Ready? More than ready. We took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The conference room where the meeting was being held was already full. Board members. Trustees. Lawyers. The heavy hitters of the Sterling business world. And at the head of the table, Sophie. She looked tired. I noticed that immediately. The strain of the last few months was showing. Her smile was still perfect, but there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She was talking to someone, laughing at some joke when we walked in. And then she saw me. The blood drained from her face. Actually drained. She went white as paper. Elena. Everyone turned to look at me. The room went silent. I walked to an empty seat near the middle of the table and sat down. Chin sat beside me, placing a briefcase on the table with deliberate care. Hello, Sophie. What are you? You can't be here. You don't have standing. You were removed from the... I'm here representing Sterling Capital Holdings, I said calmly. As the majority shareholder and CEO. I believe we have quite a lot to discuss. Sophie's mouth opened and closed. She looked around the room, seeking support, but the trustees and board members were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to fascination. Sterling Capital is, Sophie started, then stopped. I watched the realization hit her. Watched her brilliant, manipulative mind put the pieces together. No, she whispered. Yes. Chin opened the briefcase and began distributing documents. As you'll see in the materials, Sterling Capital Holdings has acquired controlling interests in 7 of the 10 major companies that generate revenue for Sterling acquisitions. Additionally, we hold approval rights on financing for virtually every major project currently in development. One of the trustees flipped through the documents. This shows ownership of over 60% of the underlying assets. Correct, I said. How is this possible? Sophie's voice was shrill now, losing the controlled charm she'd maintained. Where did you get the money? You had nothing. I had exactly what Mother left me. Everything she knew I'd need to survive what you did. Mother left you nothing. The estate. The estate you stole, yes. But Mother prepared for that. She prepared for you, Sophie. She knew what you'd do years before you did it. And she made sure I'd have the resources to come back from it. I pulled out a copy of Mother's letter and slid it across the table to her. She left me this. Her trump card. Her final protection for the daughter who actually deserved it. Sophie grabbed the letter, reading frantically. As she read, her face went from white to red. Rage. Pure, impotent rage. You can't. It's all legal. All properly documented. All completely legitimate. You can have your lawyers review everything. I gestured to the documents Chin had distributed. In fact, I encourage it. What do you want? The question came from one of the senior trustees. What's your intention here, Miss Sterling? I turned to face him. I want what's fair. Sterling Acquisitions has been mismanaged for the past year under my sister's leadership. Projects have failed. Partnerships have dissolved. The business is bleeding value. I'm here to propose a restructuring. What kind of restructuring? I want operational control returned to someone competent. Someone who understands this business. Someone who actually earned their place here instead of stealing it. You, Sophie spat. You want me to hand you the business? No, Sophie. I want you to understand something. You don't have the business to hand over. Not anymore. I own it. Not on paper, not yet, but in every way that matters. The companies. The assets. The relationships. I've spent the last 10 months building a position that makes your title meaningless. I stood up, placing my hands on the table and leaning toward her. You can stay on as CEO. Keep your office. Keep your salary. Keep pretending you're in charge. But every decision you make will go through me. Every deal will need my approval. Every move you try to make, I'll have the power to block. My voice dropped lower, harder. Or you can resign. Walk away now with your dignity intact. Take a severance package and go live your life somewhere else. Because if you fight me on this, I will destroy you. Not the way you destroyed me quickly in a courtroom. I'll do it slowly. Piece by piece. I'll expose every forged document, every embezzled dollar, every lie you told. I have evidence of everything, Sophie. Everything. And I will use it. The room was dead silent. Sophie was shaking. Actually shaking with rage and fear and the dawning realization that she'd lost. The choice is yours, I said, sitting back down. But choose quickly. Because my patience, after what you did to me, is extraordinarily thin. Sophie looked around the table, looking for allies, for support, for someone to tell her this wasn't happening. But these were business people. They understood power. They understood leverage. And they could see exactly who had it in this room. One of the trustees cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a short recess. Give Ms. Sophie Sterling time to consult with her attorneys. 15 minutes, I said. Sophie stood up so fast her chair fell backward. She practically ran from the room, her lawyer scrambling to follow her. The moment the door closed behind her, the room erupted in conversation. Questions directed at me and Chin. Demands to see more documentation. Concerns about the legality of what I'd done. But underneath all of it, I could feel the shift. The power in the room had moved. It wasn't Sophie's anymore. No, I didn't even look up from the documents I was reviewing. She has until end of business today. 5 o'clock. After that, I start filing legal actions based on the evidence I have of her fraud and embezzlement. The lawyer's face went pale. That's not enough time to. Then she'd better work fast. He left. The meeting continued without Sophie. The trustees asked questions. Chin answered them. Documents were reviewed. And slowly, methodically, I demonstrated exactly how complete my control was. By 3 o'clock, the head trustee was nodding slowly. This is unprecedented. But legal. You've structured everything properly. I had a good teacher. My mother understood how to protect assets. She taught me well. What happens to the Sterling family legacy if Sophie refuses your terms? I met his eyes. The Sterling legacy is already preserved. I'm a Sterling. The business will remain in family hands, just the right family hands. Sophie was never the right choice to lead this company. You all knew it. You just didn't have the courage to say it when she was manipulating the courts to steal her position. That hit hard. I saw several of them flinch. But that's in the past, I continued. What matters now is moving forward. Restoring proper management. Rebuilding what's been damaged. I can do that. I have the knowledge, the resources, and the motivation. The question is whether we do this cooperatively or destructively. At 4:30, Sophie's lawyer called. She would resign. Effective immediately. In exchange for a severance package and a guarantee that the evidence of her fraud wouldn't be made public. Half the severance you're requesting, I told the lawyer. And the guarantee about the evidence is conditional. If she ever makes any public statements about me, the family, or this business that are false or damaging, everything goes public. She lives quietly or she lives in ruins. Her choice. Silence on the other end. Then, she agrees. Good. Have the paperwork drawn up. I want her signature by end of day tomorrow. I hung up. Chin was grinning. You know, I've been practicing law for 35 years. I've never seen anything quite like this. Good. I'd hate to be predictable. Sophie signed the papers the next day. I wasn't there for it, I didn't need to be. Chin handled everything. She was gone from the building within a week. Her office cleared out. Her nameplate removed. Her reign over the Sterling Empire ended not with a bang, but with a whimper and a legal document. And I moved into Father's old office. Not hers. I didn't want her space. I wanted the office where the real work had been done. Where Father had built this empire from nothing. Where Mother had stood beside him, making the decisions that mattered. The first thing I did was have it completely redecorated. New furniture. New paint. Mother's favorite colors, deep blues and soft grays. I hung her portrait on the wall behind the desk. Not Father's. Hers. Because this victory was hers as much as mine. The business community was buzzing with speculation. How had Elena Sterling, the unstable sister who'd lost everything, returned with such power? Where had the money come from? What did this mean for the Sterling legacy? I didn't answer any of it. I just worked. I restructured the deals Sophie had bungled. I rebuilt relationships with partners she'd alienated. I brought in new talent and promoted people who'd been overlooked. I worked 16-hour days for months, proving that I hadn't just won through leverage, I'd won because I was better at this than Sophie ever was. The numbers didn't lie. Within 6 months, the business was profitable again. Within a year, we'd exceeded projections. And slowly, carefully, I started to reclaim the other things Sophie had stolen. The mansion I'd lost? I didn't buy it back, I built something better. A new estate, modern and sleek, with every amenity I'd ever wanted. I designed it myself. Every room. Every detail. A monument to survival. The social connections that had abandoned me? I didn't chase them. The real ones came back on their own once they saw I was no longer the broken victim they'd pitted. The fake ones stayed away, and good riddance. The reputation Sophie had destroyed? I rebuilt it on my own terms. Not as the tragic figure who'd been wronged, but as the businesswoman who'd risen from nothing to reclaim an empire. Because that's what I'd done. I'd been destroyed. Completely, utterly destroyed. And I'd come back stronger. But the business victory wasn't enough. It didn't satisfy the part of me that still burned with rage when I thought about what Sophie had done. So I used some of Mother's resources for something more personal. Remember all that evidence of Sophie's embezzlement? The forged documents? The fraud? I didn't make it public. I kept my word on that. But I did share it with certain people. The IRS, for instance. Anonymously, of course. And with several of the business partners she'd cheated over the years. People who had standing to file civil suits. And with a few journalists who specialized in financial crime, along with tips about where to look for more evidence. I didn't destroy her publicly. I just made sure that the consequences of her actions caught up with her. Naturally. Inevitably. Within 2 years, Sophie was facing multiple lawsuits. An IRS audit that revealed years of tax fraud. Criminal investigations into her financial dealings. She tried to fight it. Hired expensive lawyers. Called in favors. But the evidence was overwhelming, and unlike me, she didn't have a dead mother who'd spent her final months protecting her. Last I heard, she'd settled most of the civil suits by liquidating everything she had left. The house, the cars, the jewelry. All of it gone to pay judgments and legal fees. She's living now in a small apartment in a city 2 states away. Working a regular job. Completely anonymous. Destroyed, just like she destroyed me. The difference is, I clawed my way back. I wonder if she ever will. I wonder if she ever understood that mother knew. That mother had seen through her years before she made her move. That mother had loved one daughter enough to protect her from the other. I hope she understands. I hope it burns. As for the farmhouse, Mother's old country house where I found the safe, I kept it. I renovated it completely. Restored it to what it must have been like when Mother was young. New roof. New windows. The rot and decay stripped away to reveal good bones underneath. It's beautiful now. Peaceful. A retreat from the city and the business and the constant demands of running an empire. I go there sometimes when I need to remember. When I need to reconnect with the woman who sat on a dusty floor and read her mother's letter and decided that survival wasn't enough, she wanted victory. The safe is still there, empty now, but I keep it as a reminder. The combination's still set to my birthday. The door I can open whenever I want. A symbol of the moment my life changed. The moment I stopped being a victim and became something else entirely. People ask me sometimes if I have regrets. If I wish things had gone differently. If I wish my family had stayed together. The answer is complicated. Do I regret that my mother died? Every single day. She deserved to see me triumph. She deserved to know that her trump card worked exactly as she planned. Do I regret that my father built a family that could tear itself apart so completely? Yes. Though I understand now that some of that destruction was baked in from the beginning. You can't build something lasting on secrets and favoritism and unequal love. Do I regret what I did to Sophie? No. Not even a little bit. She made her choices. She decided that her envy and greed were more important than family, than loyalty, than basic human decency. She destroyed me deliberately, methodically, with planning and forethought. All I did was survive. And then I won. If that makes me ruthless, fine. If that makes me cold, I'll own it. Because the alternative, staying broken, staying destroyed, accepting the injustice of what she did, that wasn't an option. That would have killed me, eventually. If not literally, then in every way that matters. So I chose to fight. I chose to use every weapon Mother left me. I chose revenge. And I'd choose it again. Revenge doesn't always need blood or violence. Sometimes it's as quiet as a woman walking back into the world they tried to bury her in smiling. Sometimes it's as simple as opening a dusty safe with your birthday as the combination and finding proof that your mother loved you enough to plan for your salvation from beyond the grave. Sometimes it's as satisfying as watching everything your enemies stole crumble in their hands while you build an empire from ashes. My mother's letter didn't just save me. It taught me something I'd never fully understood before. Real power isn't about who has the most money or the biggest title or the best connections. Real power is about who's willing to do what needs to be done. Who's willing to be patient. Who's willing to play the long game. Sophie had surface power. She had the appearance of success. But it was hollow, built on theft and lies. I built real power. The kind that comes from actually understanding the business. From earning respect. From having the intelligence and determination to turn nothing into everything. She was always going to lose. She just didn't know it until it was too late. Now, 3 years after I walked out of that courtroom with nothing, I sit in my office at the top of the Sterling building and look out over the city. The view is different from up here. Clearer. I can see my new estate in the distance. The farmhouse is beyond the horizon, but I know it's there. Waiting for me when I need refuge. I can see the future of the business stretching out before me. Plans for new developments. Expansions into new markets. A legacy that will last generations, not because of the Sterling name, but because of the work I'm doing to earn it. And sometimes, in the reflection of the glass, I can see my mother's portrait on the wall behind me. Eleanor Sterling. The woman who knew her daughters better than they knew themselves. The woman who made sure that in the end, justice would be served. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. That Elena died in the courtroom when the gavel came down. Or maybe she died in the farmhouse when she stopped crying and started planning. This Elena, the one I am now, is harder, smarter, more careful about who she trusts. But she's also free. Free from the family that betrayed her. Free from the illusion that blood means loyalty. Free from the woman she was raised to be, pleasant and accommodating and willing to be victimized for the sake of keeping the peace. I am my mother's daughter. The good daughter. The strong daughter. The daughter who survived. If you believe that karma never forgets, then you understand this story. You understand that sometimes justice takes time. Sometimes it requires patience and planning and a mother's love reaching across death to protect her child. Sometimes it requires finding a dusty envelope in a hidden safe that your mother left for you because she knew that you'd need it. Your own dusty envelope might be waiting too. Your own trump card. Your own moment when you realize that you're not as powerless as they made you believe. Maybe it won't be a literal safe. Maybe it won't be a letter or money or evidence. Maybe it will be a realization, a decision, a moment when you stop accepting what they did to you and start planning how you'll rise above it. Because that's what this story is really about. Not revenge, though that's satisfying. Not money, though that's useful. It's about the moment when you decide that being destroyed isn't the end of your story. It's just the end of one chapter. And the next chapter? The next chapter you write yourself. I wrote mine in boardrooms and legal documents and strategic acquisitions. I wrote it with mother's wisdom guiding me from beyond the grave. I wrote it with every ounce of pain and rage and determination I had in me. And I wrote an ending where I won. Not because I was lucky. Not because someone rescued me. But because I refused to stay broken. 3 months ago, I watched a judge hand my entire life to the people I trusted most. Today, I hold that life in my own hands, rebuilt and better than before. The difference between those two moments is everything. It's the difference between being a victim and being a survivor. Between accepting injustice and fighting for what's right. Between the daughter who was betrayed and the woman who conquered. Sophie thought she won when she took everything from me. But you can't really take everything from someone who refuses to give up. You can take their possessions, their reputation, their place in the world. But you can't take their intelligence, their determination, their ability to learn and adapt and come back stronger. You can't take their mother's love, even after she's gone. You can't take their will. And will, pure, stubborn, furious will, that's what really wins in the end. So here I am, Elena Sterling, 39 now, CEO of a multi-million-dollar real estate empire, owner of estates in 3 states, holder of my mother's legacy and her secrets. And every day, when I walk into my office and see her portrait on the wall, I say the same thing silently. Thank you, Mother. Thank you for the trump card. Thank you for believing I was strong enough to use it. Thank you for loving me enough to plan for this moment even when you were dying. And then I get to work. Because revenge, real revenge, the kind that lasts, isn't a moment. It's not a dramatic confrontation or a public takedown. It's success. It's thriving. It's building something so solid that the people who tried to destroy you become irrelevant. It's winning so completely that you almost forget they exist. Almost. That dusty envelope changed everything. Or maybe it just revealed what was always meant to be. Maybe Mother knew from the beginning which daughter would survive and which would self-destruct. Maybe she saw in me what I couldn't see in myself until I had no choice but to find it. Strength. Intelligence. The willingness to do what needs to be done. The ability to take pain and betrayal and absolute destruction and transform it into power. That's what the letter taught me. That's what the safe contained. Not just money or evidence or legal weapons, but proof that I was loved. Proof that I was valued. Proof that someone believed in me enough to spend their final months making sure I'd survive. And once you know you're worth that kind of love, once you understand that someone believed in you that deeply, failure stops being an option. Because you're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for them. For their faith in you. For the sacrifice they made to give you a fighting chance. You're fighting to prove they were right to believe. And I proved it. Every single day I prove it. The envelope is empty now. The letter is framed in my private study at the estate. The documents have been used and returned to secure storage. But the gift Mother gave me, the real gift, that will never run out. It's the knowledge that I can survive anything, that I can be destroyed and rise again, that I have the strength to face betrayal and come out stronger, that I am my mother's daughter in every way that matters. Sophie got the beauty, the charm, the ease with which people loved her. But I got the steel, the intelligence, the determination. And in the end, steel beats charm every single time. So if you're out there somewhere, facing your own betrayal, your own destruction, your own moment when everything falls apart and you can't see a way forward, remember this story. Remember that sometimes the way forward is hidden. Sometimes it's in a dusty envelope you haven't found yet. Sometimes it's in a strength you didn't know you had. Sometimes it's in the love of someone who's gone but who made sure you'd have what you needed. Look for your safe, your letter, your trump card. And when you find it, when you finally understand that you have the power to rise again, use it. Use it wisely. Use it thoroughly. Use it to build something so strong that no one can ever take it from you again. Use it to win. Because that's what survivors do. We find the weapons we've been left. We learn to use them. And we fight back. Not with rage, though rage has its place. Not with hatred, though hatred can fuel you in dark times. But with cold, calculated, patient determination. We fight back by becoming better, stronger, more successful. We fight back by winning so completely that our enemies become footnotes in our story. That's what I did. That's what Mother's letter made possible. And if I can do it destroyed, broken, exiled to a rotting farmhouse with nothing but a rusty safe and a dead mother's love, then anyone can. Your dusty envelope is out there somewhere. Your moment is coming. And when it does, you'll understand what I understand now. Revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about rebuilding yourself into something they can never touch again. It's about winning. And I won.